Today, what are we talking about? We're talking about natural language processing. So the branch of human-computer interaction that tries to take these utterances that you and I take for granted as the magical difference between us and the rest of the animal kingdom and make them comprehensible by machines. It is the high-speed collision of mathematics and statistical modeling and computer science that somehow mashes itself together in such a way that it can make everything that you and I say comprehensible by the applications that you are building in software. Now, how many of you folks are using NLP in your applications that you're shipping as technical professionals right now? Okay, we got like 3. If you are not among them, do not feel embarrassed. Every time I ask this question, that number is never high. I would wonder why that is, right? Why is NLP so infrequent in a lot of the applications that we build? I have an idea. It's because it's really fucking hard. Natural language processing is super, super difficult. And when it comes to computer science disciplines, you'd be hard-pressed to find something that is more complicated than trying to model this magical thing that you and I take for granted. If you just cast out of your mind the fact that there are 6,500 different spoken languages here on planet Earth right now, and instead focus all your attention on English, you still have a really, really difficult problem to solve, right? You're not scoping down the problem domain to such a degree that it's even remotely addressable. And that's because the English language is beautiful because it is so ambiguous, right? Take for example, just this sentence. I saw the man on the hill with the telescope. Am I able to see him because I have a telescope? Or is there some dude running around on a hill waving around an optical instrument, right? Let's take Dan and Rob took 2 trips to Poland. They were great, right? Pronouns, absolutely destructive to a machine because what was great? Were the trips great? Was Poland great? I like to think it was Dan and Rob that were great. Right? The word bank in the Oxford English Dictionary has 25 different definitions, all of which are only provided by context, all of which you pick up in an instant because you're a human being, all of which is a little bit more expensive to do when you're talking about code. So when I ask the question about how many of you folks have NLP inside your apps, usually the answer is very small, mostly because a lot of NLP applications, like any software that has NLP in it, usually only has NLP in it, right? If you think about some of the services that you use, like Siri or Google Now or Amazon's excellent Alexa service, which you should definitely check out, or Cortana, natural language is the only interface that any of this software has. And the reason why that's the case is because the problem domain is so difficult that the team that you would hire to build that thing can only do NLP, right? That's the only problem domain they can effectively address because it's so damn complicated. Well, I think right now is a really, really great time for NLP, mostly because the open source community is providing to us normal developers interfaces that we can all use, right? Natural language processing is something that for the lay programmer, a person who's not an expert in this field, to use some of those techniques to make their experiences for their users better. Now, particularly if you're in Python, it's a really, really exciting time. That developer that you hired to manage your Django website now has the capability of integrating natural language processing techniques inside their app. Few people are giggling because they don't think it's possible. I think it's possible, and if it's okay, I'd like to take 15 minutes to show you. Does that sound okay? Okay. So my name is Rob Spectre. I do have the privilege of serving the developer network crew for a company called Twilio. We're a cloud communications firm based in San Francisco, but I live and work right here in the greatest city in the world, New York. How many of you guys have heard of Twilio before? A whole bunch of folks. Do you guys know how it works? Okay, we're just going to skip over that stuff and just write some code. Does that sound good to you? Okay, first let's buy a number. David, where are you from originally, man?
I grew up in Randolph, New York.
Randolph, New York? What's the area code there, man?
It's 716. 716?
Let's see if we have some 716 numbers up in the old biscuits. So we got Lockport, we got Rochester, we got Gowanda, Niagara Falls, always wanted to be there, never have. I can take that trip with Twilio now. Awesome. So I'm going to pick up this new 716 number with Twilio, and I'm going to point it to a tunnel that I'm going to set up on my machine to answer the text messages that you guys send out. So if you guys can whip out your phones right quick, we're going to have a little fun cutting a little code and doing a little NLP. So for those of you that haven't used Twilio before, basically very simple webhook interface. Anytime someone sends a text message to the 716 number that we have on the board, it's going to make a request to my web app. So we need to make a web app right quick. And if anyone in the back can't see it, or if you need to adjust, or if you need to like go get a beer or something, like we're not in church, you can stand up and move around if you guys want to. I'm going to fire up a Python app, and I'm going to use, for the purposes of illustration, a micro framework called Flask. If you're not a Python user, it's totally okay. This is still going to be comprehensible. If you're like a Ruby user or something like that, it's very similar to Sinatra, if you've ever seen that before. I'm going to grab a request object so I can see the text messages that you guys are sending me. And then I'm also going to import a little helper to provide some responses to Twilio and respond to the text messages that you guys send in. I'm then going to create a new Flask app. I'm going to have it answer on /SMS any post request that comes in with a function that I'm going to call SMS. I'm going to create a new response object that is going to respond with some TWIML, the Twilio markup language. That's going to tell Twilio to send back a message. Hey guys, thanks for coming in the rain. I'm at, and I'll give you guys my Twitter handle if you guys feel like catching up after the big event. That's the sound that text messages make. I don't know if you knew that. I'm going to finish up with a little boilerplate that is going to make the app run. Make it set debug to true, and then run the app. Cool. So I'll then execute the app, and I'm going to use a service called mgrok to take the local port 5000 on my machine and publish it to the internet. So provided all that has worked, if you guys could send a text message to the number on the screen, we're going to have a little fun. Let's see if this works. So we're going to send a text message to Niagara Falls at 716-236-8523. That number again, for those of you who are on Android and are trying to figure out where they moved the SMS interface, is 716-236-8523. Cool. Does everybody have the number all dialed in? 716-236-8523. Cool, so that's a little fun, but in order for us to actually see what's going on, why don't we grab the body of the text messages that you guys are sending to me. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, just pipe up. We're not going to take questions at the end, so just as you have them, just let me know. I'm going to use the logger that comes with Flask to spit out two things. One, what you sent to me. Crank out some new lines, and then send you, then going to send the message that I send to you. Cool. And we'll do that with some simple string substitution with the body. And we're going to go into this response object and pull out the body of the text message that I'm sending to you. Does that make sense? Cool.
Just ask a question.
Sure.
Do you get metadata from the text that comes in?
Holy biscuits, do I ever. Would you like to see it? Okay, I'll go ahead and try to tack that on to the end. Does that sound good? Cool. So if you guys send in a text message again, somebody's asking where the pizza is, Dan. Someone's doing the careful emoji thing, trying to break my Python code. I am doing this in Python 3, so you guys can chill. Okay, cool. So now in a few minutes, we have a buffer going with everybody everybody sending the text messages in. And just so we're clear, this is what you send my app. This is what my app's sending to you. Sound good? Okay. Everybody's drop table star. Come on, man. That's not loving. I thought this was a safe environment. Okay. So now that we got some text coming in, we'd like to do, or now that we have some natural language coming in, for some of you, we want to go ahead and process it and do some fun stuff. So I'm going to use the thing that we're going to take you guys through is a fun Python module called text blob, and then talk about some other modules in the Python ecosystem around NLP that you can use in your production apps. But this interface is like really, really simple to use in the sense that all you have to do is pass the blob a string, and you can perform some natural language processing on it, right? An example of some of that processing that you could do is tokenization. For the NLP experts, what's tokenization? It's where you split the string up into its linguistic components, right? Not necessarily everything that's in between the spaces, but the constitutive elements of that language string, right? And one of those things is like a word, so I can send back a simple NLP hello world by sending back to you the number of words that you sent me by looking at the length of the words that are in my little text blob object. So if you guys send in sudo rmrf. Wow. That's really, really nice, guys. Really nice. Right. If I send in really nice, it'll send back that you sent me 2 words. One person said, I see you shiver with anticipation. Attempt to break it, which it did not. It did not break it. Looks like. So, yeah. So we have the capability of breaking things down by words. That's not super useful unless you can like get a sense of what they actually are. So we can also look at the classifications of these individual words, like their parts of speech, by taking a look at their tags. And one of the things we can do is go through the tags for our blob, and if it is classified as a proper noun, for example, we can extract those and send a message back. I found these proper nouns, and just send you back that list. So if we loop back and I whip out my phone, send a message saying, David Morrow's talk was grand. Mr. Babinski is next. All right, and send that. That's good. I have no idea what's happening in New York. New York is a proper noun. Tragically, Keanu is a proper noun. I like pizza. Our capital's proper. Mr. Anderson, welcome back. We missed you. Yeah, you can see us starting to pick out some proper nouns. Rob is the Keanu Reeves of developers. Wow, this is. I don't get this kind of trolling except when I'm in Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys.
Is it just basing,
Cool.
Is it just basing proper nouns on caps?
Say what?
Is it just basing the proper nouns on caps?
This particular classifier is the one that's built into NLTK, and it does heavily look at stuff with caps, but also with content. So if you have, say, like Norwegian names that have like Vander in between the letters with capital letters, it will pick out those proper nouns. So it's a little bit more intelligent than that. This particular library also affords the opportunity to use a better classifier, the one that's bundled with the pattern library, which is really strong. And especially when it comes to proper nouns, I think it's a superior tool.
A little off topic, but I'm used to NLTK from a couple of years ago. What is text blob?
So text blob, I think, is following in a tradition in the Python ecosystem for making stuff that is typically difficult to do with existing interfaces easier to use. So a good example of this is the request library, right? The whole slogan for requests was HTTP for humans, a sane interface for HTTP. Text blob is following in that tradition, trying to make NLP for humans, right? Very basic NLT functionality that you would get in NLTK, and turn them into one-liners like what you're seeing here. A lot of the stuff that TextBlob uses is dependent on NLTK. You have to install NLTK as one of the dependencies. But there are a bunch that we'll talk about in a bit that are going on in the Python community. If you haven't looked at NLP in the Python community in a while, a lot of shit has happened, like some really fun stuff. And the past 2 years have been great. Like the past 2 years have been really cool. Let's do a couple things that are practical. Ryan had a question about sentiment analysis. Let's do that. That's always fun. You can take a look at sentiment, which is something that is commonly done in natural language processing, and I think underused by developers who are accepting user feedback, right? Because if you have the capability of divining the sentiment of an individual statement, I think you have the opportunity to make your app a lot more intelligent. So in this particular case, we just fired up the app to read your sentiment and just kind of spit back the object to you. So if I say I'm happy, I'm going to get one set of values. If I say I'm sad, I'm going to get a different set of values. And did I lose my internet access? There's this crowd so big I'm starting to bump up against. Say what? Did I save it? Yes. I am sad. Uh-oh. SpaghettiOs. Okay, so I am connected. I may be bumping up against our API limit to prevent people from sending exploitative text messages. Is probably what's going on here. So let's make this a little easier. Uh-oh. No, actually, it is. Oh, it is the internet access, it looks like. Oh, am I returning a blank page for Twilio? Oh, this is not great. Not great stuff.
Did you try unplugging and replugging in?
Hey, I also tried Control-Alt-Delete. Oh my goodness.
Did you try all the four?
No, actually, you know what we just did? We did install Encapsula on the primary domain.
It's not just us then. It makes us look like.
Yeah, I think we may be getting throttled by our new DDoS protection shit, which is, awesome.
Is that all sites or?
No, I suspect it's happening because there are a lot of requests coming off of this IP address that appear to have shenanigans stuff in it, which our system will. It is loading on mobile. Well, my phone would be blowing up if it wasn't loading at all. Cool. Let me see if it gave a little bit to chill. Okay. Let's try one more time. Okay, let's stop with the SQL injection and bullshit phrases. Okay, now we're getting some stuff. This demo is sick. I'm hungry. Twilio, I love you. That's really, really kind. And you can see it's grabbing some polarity on your statement and some subjectivity on your statement, which is, if you're using a developer, or if you're accepting any input from your users, you can use in really, really subtle ways that make a big difference in your user experience, right? Like if the sentiment's polarity is greater than 0, that is to say that it's positive, you can change your copy in such a way that it recognizes that awesomeness, right? I can say, rad, I'm stoked, you are stoked, right? If it's negative, that is to say if the polarity of that statement is below 0, we can also respond, right? Saying, Rayler, I'm bummed, you're bummed. And if we can't get any sense of what it is, we can just respond with the most ambivalent phrase in the English language, which is just meh, right? And so if I do say I'm happy, and I do say I'm sad, and I do say I am ambivalent, right? I can get different responses, right? And that's not to say that I have to necessarily, radically shift the application to respond in like hugely different ways, right? We can also only do it when we feel that our confidence is high, that the polarity is accurate, right? Because nearly every sentiment analyzer is going to provide you not just how confident it is, but also how confident it is, right? How in this case, the subjectivity property represents the confidence interval, right? I can't see your sentiment. And so if you have something that's a little more ambiguous, right? Like yay or something like that, it may decide to take a different action based upon the subjectivity of your piece. Right?
Is the sentiment also modular?
The sentiment is modular. You can also supply your own sentiment analyzer too. They have a base sentiment analyzer class that you can extend. So if you have a model that you're constantly updating based upon like your user input, like if your users are like sending like LOL or have like particular terminology that's like positive that only ends up in like your particular problem domain, like you can totally update that analyzer on the fly as opposed to using the one that's stock built in. Cool. Do we got time for one more? Do you guys want to see one more? Would that be okay? Okay, cool. Cool. So another thing that I think is underutilized by developers, in addition to sentiment, which is super easy to do, right? Like, it's instantiating like one object and adding in one conditional, and like this for small amounts of text, that is to say less than a page, takes adds milliseconds onto your load, right? And this is not even the most performant sentiment analyzer in the Python ecosystem. There's one called Scapy that is absolutely blindingly fast. So even if you have large amounts of text, you can perform some sentiment analysis on it. Another thing is the problem of irregular verbs, which is something that is part of the reason why NLP is such a difficult problem domain. So if I am just doing a naive implementation of a marketplace app, right? Like if someone's buying something, I'm going to connecting you with a seller, right? So let's imagine that this simple text interface represents you connecting people to a double-sided marketplace, right? So user gives some indication that they want to buy something. You're going to want to put them to the seller side, right? If the person wants to sell something, you want to put them connecting you to a buyer, right? If we don't get anything, we'll just cover this edge by saying, I don't know what you want me to do, which is what I say to my girlfriend's dog nearly every time I see it. Cool. So if we have this interface, up and say, I want to buy a guitar, right? The happy path is going to work, right? If I say I want to sell some drums, I'm going to get a different response back, right? I'm going to connect you to a buyer. But obviously, both sides of these marketplaces are going to be serving the same constituencies, so you want to direct those users in the same place. Now, there's a big problem with the words buy and sell, and what's that?
Buy.
Well, this dastardly little thing in the English language called tenses, right? Like, if I bought a guitar and it is broken, my app suddenly isn't going to know what to do, right? Even though it should probably send me to the seller section of the marketplace, right? And this is where an NLP, underutilized in my opinion, NLP technique called lemmatization comes in. Who knows what a lemma is? Go ahead, champ. Right, it's a root is one way of thinking of it. The way I kind of describe it is it's the Platonic form of the word that you're describing, right? So it's more than merely the root, right? It's the thing that word actually represents in the mind of the viewer. So One way that we could take a look and explore the application of lemmatization is by going through all the tags in our blob. And if it is a verb, we'll extract it, right? And if we have some verbs, we'll go through each of those verbs. And if by is in the lemma of that verb, then we'll respond connecting you to seller. If sell is the lemma of that verb, we'll respond that we're connecting you to a buyer. Right? And if we get to the end of this whole goat rodeo and we don't see any verbs at all, we're going to assume we couldn't recognize anything, and we'll just respond, I don't know. Cool. Okay. So if we save that guy and make it Pep8, because that's always a good thing to do, we should have a dramatically smarter app, right? So if I want to buy a guitar, I'll connect me to the seller. I done could have sold you a guitar. It's going to connect you, right? Trust cannot be bought and sold. I bought Twilio. That's expensive now. I sold a guitar today. You can see that regardless of the tense of the word, right, you can send them in the most appropriate place, right? And this is not something that is going to dramatically alter your app in a significant way, right? It's just adding a little sprinkle of NLP that makes your app more responsive to the possible edge cases that you can't predict with your user input. Cool. Well, last thing I'll have for you guys, you've been very, very generous with your time. I haven't done this talk a lot, so if you could text 1 to 10 to this, let me make sure it stops so you're not getting back your thing. If you could text 1 to 10 on your likelihood that to recommend this talk to a friend or colleague, it would be super helpful for me as I'm tuning up this talk. Just 1 through 10 is an integer, and any feedback that you have on the talk. That would be great. That would be great. Thanks a lot, guys. That's all I got.